Welcome to AR, VR, or invisible media, a glimpse into the media of tomorrow. I want to let everybody know that this is a media convention, so feel free to tweet with glee throughout our conversation, hashtag MCB17. And if anybody needs translation assistance, we have headsets by the entrance. Okay, so welcome to the panel. We're consuming a lot of media these days. In fact, we're inundated. And the way it's coming in is just these bite-sized packets of information, so we're losing context. So today, over the course of the next hour, we're going to be sharing some thoughts on the media of tomorrow, what it will look like, how we'll be consuming it, and possibly what brands or powers will be playing a role in this media. I'd first like to introduce our panelists, all of whom are luminaries in digital culture. First, we have, right in the middle, we'll do Natalie Kane, curator and editor with Future of Everything. This is a preeminent innovation lab and festival of digital culture in the UK, deemed one of the top 10 idea festivals in the world. We have Nelly Bin Ayoub, dubbed... What's that?
No, that's great. That's really good.
We had a big debate
really,
it was really stressful.
Just perfect pronunciation. Isn't she amazing? I mean, come on. Yes, sir? Yes. Full of energy, you don't get that often.
This woman is dubbed the Willy Wonka of design. She is an award-winning filmmaker and designer who devises extreme experiences and events that intersect at the intersection of science, politics, art, and theater. Very exciting stuff. And then last but not least, we have Martin Wazowski, Chief Designer at SAP. SAP is a premier enterprise software design company. They are based in Germany, but they have offices all over the world in 130 countries. And they design software to help manage business operations and customer relations. Everybody, let's welcome our panelists.
Thank you, Katrin.
Thank you.
So this is a conversation not only among us, but among you. So if at any point in time you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll pass around a mic. But first, to get started, I want to ask you guys, how do you feel about the future of media? Who is like, oh God, this is really scary? Anybody? Say boo. We have one boo. Really? Are you honest? Okay. So who's really excited? Say yay!
I'm pretty excited.
Is there anybody in the middle who's like, oh? Okay, that's where I am. Thank you. We got a little shake here. Okay, now, I know all of you are working in future media. It's very exciting. Does anybody have a dark secret that they're nervous about the future of media?
Oh, yeah. Like 100% nervous, but I guess nervous energy is one of those things that you have to kind of figure out what it is that's making you nervous and why. And if you don't kind of tap into that a bit, it can just become this wild, unknowable, horrible monster under the bed problem. But if you kind of interrogate it close enough and kind of go, okay, so why am I nervous? Why is this making me nervous? Who is making me nervous? Then that's where I kind of start from as a point.
Fantastic. So would you be able to answer those questions? Who is making Natalie nervous?
I think it's people. It's
humans.
I mean,
She's really sociable.
Humans are pretty crazy and do crazy stuff as soon as we are allowed, and fuck things up pretty badly unless we start to guide ourselves and design sort of a community or a conversation we want to be in. We are handed conversations. And when people hand us conversation, we say, I'm not responsible for this, screw this, and we screw stuff up, and that should make you nervous. Look around. But if as soon as we start to taking care of that and having a proper conversation and designing it, I would love to call it designing a future, because you can do that. These conversations start to be very nice and at least very educating, and that's good.
I mean, for me, it's like, how do we define media then? Because I think in your, from your headline there, which by the way is missing a R on world, which I think is quite interesting, the media world of tomorrow, right? You know, even though I cannot see anything without my glasses from far away, I can see that one. But, you know,
I
so
didn't
talking
write
about actually here is a media type, right? Like as in, I think things are getting done in a very fast pace. So there is different type of media, of course. They are produced at a different kind of pace, whether it's long form, whether it's short form, whether it's, you know, conversation piece like it is there, whether it's symposium, whether it's, you know, what sort of like media are we actually talking about? Are we saying that media is a sort of a documentation of a real action which is taking place? Or do we consider this discussion here as a form of media? Because, of course, there is a second level involved with it, which is basically people tweeting or kind of reassessing or commenting on the discussion which is taking place here. So I think to me, it's like, what, you know, again, how do we define that format? First of all, and then within that, yes, there is some element that, you know, are uncertain, scary, you know, like fake news, obviously. I think that has been discussed quite a lot in the, you know, previous discussion I've seen, you know, yesterday. But I think it's, yeah, so how do we define that? And I think, I mean, I don't know, you probably have other questions regarding, you know, AR, VR, or what do we mean by invisible? Oh, wow. Well done, this
guys,
is it. We just got the R on the wall. But I think, yeah, it says a lot. It's like, you know, some words have changed, actually, through the use of social media, right?
Right.
So I think there is an evolution in semiotics as well that, to me, is actually quite, if we were to try and be positive, quite interesting. Not that we lose a R to word, I don't really think that that's adding much to it. But I think, yeah, it's just like a new language that kind of come out of the use of media. I'm just trying to be positive because, you know, otherwise, you know, we just want to shoot ourselves after this conversation. But I think it's like, how can we also see the positive in the way that people are using, you know, all of these different formats, whether they have been there in the past, you know, 200 years, you know, when you think about the Greek and the agora and content, and how content is being produced. It's a whole new labor that is being developed.
And yeah, these are emergent forms of communication. But I'm curious, like, talking about these kind of state powers or these people that are watching this control, who is creating this media? I know that it's a symbiotic relationship, but at some point, is it being placed on the public who are engaging, or the public asking for it just by their behavior? I know that even social media, for me, kind of pushes me in this direction of like really primal behavior, which I'm not happy about. But I think all of us are kind of reckoning with that. Who's making it?
It's a really tough question.
I'm sorry.
No, I guess it's because obviously we've reached a point of sort of, as you're saying, sort of ubiquitous content creation where anyone, the kind of dream of the internet was to have the ultimate sort of democracy to create what you wanted, and to kind of go out and everywhere. But the problem is that somewhere there has been a kind of almost like fracture or corruption point where it isn't the dreams that we wanted to be back in. I think I saw someone talking about democracy on the internet, I think yesterday, how those dreams have corrupted from like 2007, but even earlier than then, if you look at the kind of early Californian ideology around the internet being this, like, I think it's John Perry Barlow who did the Californian kind of manifesto for the internet. But there's been a point where I think that we've lost a hold of, you mentioned about kind of essentially accountability and who was willing to kind of take responsibility to pass it on, to be accountable. Yeah. And often it's very hard for you to actually even see where that comes in. It's like the Bruno Latour black box problem, where like you see what goes in and you see what comes out, but you don't actually see the system that makes those decisions in the middle, because there's so many different things now going in and so many different things coming out that there's just, that has become hugely opaque in the process. I'm quite interested as a sort of futures researcher, but as a curator, to see what that black box kind of looks like now. So, I don't know.
I mean, maybe, Martin, you have like more expertise inside this black box, right? Because if I understood correctly, SAP, who is a company you work for, is pretty much like the black box of the world.
So
that's
Martin's
what you say.
Creating it. Is what you're saying.
So maybe you can share with them what this is.
SAP is the black box of the world. You heard it here first, guys. No, but it's good. I think, yeah, we talked about very briefly about the truth machine during lunch. And that's, you don't leave that topic over lunch, right? Because you started immediately. What the hell is the truth? As a, you know, you don't have to be a philosopher to question yourself on every centimeter of a discussion, what is the truth? But at least we could do this, stick to facts. What the black box, or at least what algorithms and software can do today, is to be very, very quick and tell you, I don't know, who is the tallest person here? so we don't make shit up. Who is lying right now about the spending for healthcare in this region? You saw, what's his name, Microsoft dude, Steve Ballmer, right? And his latest stuff. USA Facts, help me, yeah? Something like this. So he was angry about the tax spending, and his wife told me, okay, now you quit Microsoft, basically you need to do something with your life, so don't ask these questions, answer them. So yeah, but it's easy, someone is doing it already. Figure out that nobody does. But these things are in the black box, and we can ask. So if someone accusing you, no, my taxes are going to this and that. I grew up in Sweden, by the way, we love taxes. And you can go, no, they don't. They are here, here, and here, shut up. Can we continue with the new discussion? Or can we write poems and drink wine and smoke cigarettes, because that's human, instead of arguing about who spends more taxes?
So I would argue, as someone who previously, unfortunately, was exposed to Brexit, how much, when you tell people the truth and you verify it with facts, people do not believe you. Because people are emotional beings. They're emotional. Yes. It doesn't come from facts. And the problem is that, obviously, I naturally interrogate everything to within an inch of its life, which is why I've been called a human demotivational poster before. Purely because when you think about the truth and what facts are, you have to kind of ask, well, who decided that information was correct? Who collected it? What systems of bias and prejudice does it subscribe to beforehand? But with Brexit, people voted to leave the EU because of a fucking bus. Like, that's what happened. Boris Johnson put £350 million to the bus, while the Remain campaign were basically saying, no, this is what you will lose, this is what you will lose. But because people are emotional, they just saw what they could gain, even if it was a lie, which is £350 million for the NHS, which is rubbish.
Precisely what was happening in the US with the vote for Trump.
But isn't that our job, or I don't know, your job as well? Because I would love to be in your alternative reality, to tell stories. Because look, say if we can fish up every damn fact, undeniable in the world, what you just said will happen anyway. So where are the touching narratives that are so positive, so optimistic, that makes you basically cry and long for that future? Because we know that the brain computes danger much faster than opportunity, right? This is why we survived, by the way, as monkeys. And now we use this for stupid stuff, or newspapers use it to sell you a piece of made-up news. You're gonna die. You're gonna get fat. You're gonna get cancer. Brexit, I don't know. Europe will eat your babies, and all these things.
All of this.
Why can't we create narratives building on the facts? So first we do the truth machine, all right? Then you do the stories, and then what then?
And how do you do it quickly? How do you build that context of story? I mean, you're doing that with public engagements.
But I don't know if it has to be quick. I mean, this is the whole point. I think there is different, I mean, everything we are talking about is actually really complex issues. So, when you're saying it's about the bus, saying the lie, I get that. But at the same time, it's, there is also old, kind of tradition as well of the UK, kind of not seeing itself as a part of Europe, and kind of, the way that education has been kind of embracing that straight at the start by actually ignoring the part of history in the history book about Europe, specifically in the UK. Yeah. Well, of course, if you go in France, where, actually it's a big part of the history book when, you're in high school and so on. So, all of this stuff, I think, is really complex, and it will be maybe, I don't feel like we cannot really speak about, even with Trump, yes, he was really emotional, I think, but to some extent there is really massive, kind of viruses that kind of go and grind and kind of get themselves through society, and it takes quite a lot of time. So what you were saying about the black box, I think is really interesting. When it comes to media, it is true that right now, I think the issue I personally have with it is the fact that it's becoming totally anonymous. So, the same goes for Google. When you're you're going there, you're Googling a tree, for example, in Germany, and you're tree, and then here you go, you see the picture of the tree, and you're like, okay, that must be a tree because Google is telling me that's that. Yeah. But actually, it's pretty much the number of people that click on that specific picture that will actually get that picture on the top of your Google search, right? So to some extent, it's all, I think to some extent it becomes these things where you do not know who are the people that kind of click behind that definition of what a tree looks like. And you just assume that this is what it is. So there is all of these very complex power structures or these very complex actors that we do not know who they are, we do not know what they... And so to me, it's been very much, my practice has been very much for the past 5 years, really, like has shifted from not just designing experience in the context of people's everyday, but really looking at how you can design experience in the context of the institution, and actually started to think about how I could, as a designer, try to define films, make films that will reveal power structures, not just to the institution, but also to members of the public. So, for example, we did a film which is called Disaster Playground, which is about, the chain of command which is in place when an asteroid is to strike. And you go through the entire chain of command, you meet each of the scientists that will have a role to play if an asteroid was to strike, and you meet each of them, and what you realize is actually there is a power structure, there is a procedure in place, but nobody really knows actually how to enact it. So same goes for the media. I want to know who in each company is making decision. I want to have an organigram. I want to know who is running Facebook in Berlin, or in Germany. Who are the people that are, what is their background? And I think once you start to know all of that, and once you start to make it very visible to the audience, then to some extent, you kind of maybe get to, start of having actually in-depth conversation with media, maybe. Or not in-depth, but at least you kind of, I think for me it comes down to that, like the revealing this power structure. And to some extent, this figure, sorry, I'm speaking a bit too long. This figure is not, like, if you go back all the way to the 50s, already in the 50s, they had issue with that, I mean, it's kind of like, I think it goes with generation. Now we are in much more trouble because, of course, there is much more media than there used to be in the 50s. But, if you take people like Roland Barthes, for example, who write about mythology, mythology, and like Roland Barthes is a sociologist I was talking about, semiotics, how you use semiotics in the context of culture, and trying to reveal the semiotics to members of the public through his writing. Right? And I think for me, it's what it comes down to, like, who are the mythologists of today? Who are the people that reveal this power structure? Yes. How can we embed them into all of this institution to actually reveal it to us?
Something quite interesting that you mentioned that we're getting to around sort of slowness and complexity in culture. So kind of Stuart Brand's idea of like the rate of change kind of sees the world in kind of a sort of rainbow type circle where you have culture at the very center, which moves incredibly slowly, and then fashion moves the fastest, and infrastructure moves a little bit faster but slower. And but one of the things and the real benefits I see of art and narrative is the ability to slow the future down and to see all of its moving and working parts and see where the culture is being shifted and changed, and allows us to really analyze those things. And I guess that's the importance of narratives and stories, and which is why I'm more hesitant when media is being used to kind of, I don't know, we were talking yesterday in the pub about how Black Mirror works as it was supposed to be this kind of interrogative narrative, but actually it's quite unhelpful in the same way that like super utopian narratives are really unhelpful because they strip away any complexity that was there. So how do we create sort of interesting stories about the future that allow us to see, as you said, like all of these sort of power and state actors, and what, is there new media that we can use this, or is it just a case of going back to the beginning and seeing how narratives start? I don't know.
Have you seen Black Mirror? Everybody, do you know about Black Mirror? No?
Yeah.
Maybe you want to tell them a bit more about what it is.
So Black Mirror is a show by a hilariously grumpy British person, Charlie Brooker, because we're all grumpy when we're British. And a lot of these stories look at kind of our base fears and nervousness and worries about kind of emerging and new technologies. So you have people who have like contact lenses that record your life, but then something goes wrong where actually someone stalks someone else, and then there's every single episode is a nightmare of new media culture. But what they're meant to do essentially is to make us think about what possible ethical, social, and cultural things could go wrong, as well as like us wanting the shiny new technology. And a lot of my job as a futures researcher is looking at that, but from a slightly more boring perspective, and then trying to work with artists to see what it looks like to pull those elements out and see not just where they're negative and terrifying, but also where they could be hopeful. Like, I'm a speculative realist. I don't think there's any shiny utopian future that's going to look any particularly different from where it looks now. But I know people who do tell positive and are telling positive stories, I guess. But
let's make an experiment then. I mean, Black Mirror is fantastic. Have you seen it? You must see it as you described, and just don't do it too late or too drunk, because it really gets to you.
Depressing.
Yeah.
pretty
So,
dark.
or both. So imagine this: we only tell utopian stories to each other. Imagine such a world, and we do this over and over again. Imagine the second fact here, or second component. We are very, very curious human beings and very creative. So from childhood, there's nobody that tells you different than you're very, very creative, which is also truth when you're born. And now combine these two things. We tell very utopian stories to each other, and we are extremely creative. Third story, we build everything on knowledge, facts, scientific facts, since truth can be discussable, right? This is the best knowledge we have right now for this moment. Let's find a better one. I promise you, if you combine these three things, we would be on Mars 150 years ago and be very, very happy. Again, smoking cigarettes and drinking wine without getting unhealthy in any way. Because people do what we say. We can only be where we can imagine. Nothing else has happened so far that proves the opposite. See what I mean? So if you stick to the bullshit, you get bullshit. And this is what I'm trying to get rid of. And trying to say, go from the dots that you observe. This is the technology, for example. This is the glasses. Go to the futures that are possible, which is Black Mirror, one of them. Then choose, actively freaking choose, do the hard job to choose the desirable ones. And then say where you can play a role that is positive.
I think I wildly disagree with a lot of what you're saying, because the problem is the people who make utopias and decide that utopias aren't often the ones that have to deal with like structural, racial, sexist inequality. And actually the problem is when we go for utopias and we go for these shiny kind of versions of things, we often forget about the people who are left out because they don't have a role in defiant narrative, and which is why I'm interested in people who are looking at that stuff to see where it's better. Because if you constantly go for the nice, good stuff and the mild stuff, what happens to all the people who currently aren't experiencing that stuff?
That's the chicken and egg story. I just made an utopian picture of that. Now you just screwed it up by reality. And you would be right now, right? I mean, I'm not saying. What I'm saying is that we can dwell on that and continue to be realists and just observe the reality and say, yeah, here it is. Sucks. Big time. Or we can just say, this is not good enough. We're doing a different thing. Sexism is not okay. Here's the alternative. Racism is not okay. Here's the alternative. And we only speak about that.
I'm not going to ask the question of like, what is the alternative to racism? Because that's a bigger question than this panel. But yeah.
And we're also speaking. Hello? Okay. We're also speaking about narratives, which is very important. But in practical terms, how is the media, the way, the format, the context, the way we deliver these narratives concretely, how can we change the way we design these? Or what are you thinking about in your own work as you design these to reshape that narrative, to make it more utopian rather than dystopian?
One thing I would say is about, like, when you, let's say you want to, so when you put a feature film together, then you ultimately, in order to pitch it and to get funder or supporter, you obviously have to know who is your audience, right? Who is the audience that you're actually producing the content for. And that's actually, it's been quite an interesting process for me because I come more from the design angle. So I used to, make products that obviously are all a bit bonkers, but still they are products. So when you start to go into the media realm and you're starting to put films together, then ultimately it's all about where do you want to show it, how, and there is of course a market as well associated with film, whether you want it to be kind of like recognized by a certain type of critic. So at the end of the day, it really, it comes down to who is the audience and what sort of, what do you want their engagement to be about? And, ultimately, like when you look at AR or VR, they are quite exclusive, like in terms of the audience that they represent.
Currently.
Currently, yes. But I think, I can hear something going on. But I think, it's, is it me like breaking down the sound system?
I can hear it.
You can hear it? Yeah, it's like, so it's quite an exclusive content. And what is, how do you define invisible media? I mean, what is invisible media?
These are notifications, messages, the constant influx on our smartphones of data.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about like who are we trying to actually get engaged with the world of tomorrow to start with? I mean, because if I'm looking at your question there, a glimpse into the media world of tomorrow. Who wants to be engaged with the tomorrow?
Yeah.
And is there a reason for, you know, I mean, I'm guessing that you want us to think about like maybe the brands or, you know,
Absolutely.
because I mean, obviously they are the ones that ultimately have an interest in trying to get members of the public to.
That's right. And they're out there to make money.
So I mean, to go to Nally's point, like that audience question is so important because actually you have the ones. So I come more from an art background. So rather than designing products, I don't design experiences, but I help bring people into potential environments or speculative realities. And at Future Everything, a lot of the work that we do is kind of either kind of giving people objects or propositions and saying, well, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about putting your body in that particular world? It can be a completely dumb artifact that doesn't do anything but tells you about a future reality. So one of the things that we're going to be working on in the future is looking at a lot of the work around immersive environments, and I'm actually going to go and do a PhD on it, which is fun. But looking at the idea of where you can use media or existing media or evolving media in different ways to give a more visceral or embodied experience of media, beyond like you having a neural network link chip thing in your head or like AR or VR, but what happens when you want to walk through an exhibition about climate change, and what happens in every room is that it goes up by a degree every time based on speculative things that are there, and like the noise level goes up and all of that weird stuff that you can kind of create to make people physically put themselves in there, because often it's quite hard, and it's the reason why I have a lot of issues with like VR around sort of charity and like the thing at Davos about the refugee camp VR thing. Which I think missed the mark a lot, because obviously it's very nice if you were a guy in a suit and you put a VR headset on and you can go and walk through Calais, but then you take it off again and you can have your champagne and everything's fine again. Because empathy in that respect is a trap. Because,
but I mean, again, I mean, I would just, with that specific, so you're talking about Cloud of Sidra, which is this VR experience where, you know, you get to actually experience the life, you know, you put your VR headset and you get to experience the life of a refugee in a camp. So, you know, maybe you think that these people are just having their champagne and so on, but the reality is, you know, that what I think is quite powerful about this specific one is actually Gabo, who is the director of that film, got to get United Nations diplomat to actually go and try at least to see or visualize some of the, you know, some of the things that they just don't want to say. And because, of course, it's kind of like, you know, you kind of block them up into that specific context. To me, it's a much more interesting context for virtual reality to actually impose it to diplomats than, you know, actually have it on an entertainment level. So I wouldn't just slam this project totally, because I think, you know, what he has done is really complex. He actually went all the way to the United Nations, which is a very complex institution to go to, you know, got these diplomats actually put their headset. Whether or not that got an effect on them, I don't know. I mean, it might have. It still is quite, you know.
This kind of charity work and walking away and having champagne exists regardless of the VR, the technological experience. This has been going on forever.
Yeah, of course, it's a history of like kind of more commercial. One of my early jobs was working at a charity call centre, phoning up people, asking them for £5 a month, which is an interesting job if anyone wants to ask me about that later. But you're right, actually, that like maybe I was too quick to dismiss it in a lot of ways. But I guess the problem is that I worry that becomes the only way, or one of the like only sort of accepted means to use media in that way to kind of have that experience. I mean, the reason why I kind of say empathy is a trap is because people think that that's a quick fix or an easy way of transporting people there, but actually it is that complexity, and if you don't understand sort of what role empathy is going to have, like empathy is willed out like algorithms was last year. What is empathy? Who gets to decide what is an empathetic experience and how you? I don't know. It makes me feel deeply uncomfortable, but maybe it's more my own.
No. I mean, I understand what you're saying. It's like, of course, it's like just going through a virtual reality visuals of the experience of a refugee. It's kind of like, you know, and like you said, like the expectation might be that people might not just even like consider actually going in the field and really understanding for real what the issues are, and just think it's okay to just put their headset. I understand you know, the question there, but at the same time, it's like it's a start. I mean, it's a start of a discussion.
Martin,
you know.
Martin, what kind of questions are you asking your clients when building a piece of software? I mean, if you're a driving force behind this new technology and the way people work with technology, what kind of questions are you asking?
That's good. Similar questions, because we're creating tools for people to work, basically. And, and you could say that companies like ours, we are in the software business. That's basically truth, but it's not. It's just a lie. What we are, the business we are in is sort of a quality time. How good is the quality of the time you spend at work? You can ask this question, oh, this day was shit. This day was fantastic. I felt creative, I created new business, or I created whatever you create at work. And I think we are in that business. So we ask questions, what is work?
Okay.
Seriously. What should people, humans, work with? What are we good at inherently somehow? What kind of different realities can we create for people to feel better at work and perform better? And so on. So, for example, should we be creative in business or should we be analytical in business? The answer from the third industrial revolution, yeah, analytical. Scalable efficiency, but if you say scalable efficiency to a programmer, they think, you're talking about algorithms, right? Yeah, you just described a program. But unfortunately, I also describe an analytical worker at work, a human. And that's not good. It can't just be true 20 years from now. We can leave that to the machines so we can become human. And in my opinion, we can become human at last. We've never been human. We've been chasing, hunting, gathering, and making fires and all sorts of stuff to survive, and never had the time to sit down and reflect, experience alternative realities, be extremely emotional about something, being dubious, argue, having opinions. We rather try to be machines and try to produce facts that our brain can't unless you're autistic, because it's so complex to crunch these numbers. Now we have machines that can help us, so we can spend our time imagining stuff that is extremely positive to where we are today, which is the future. So that's what's work. And for me, as someone said, adjusting margins in your Word document, that's not work. But writing a love letter, it is. Mm-hmm. How can we make people writing love letters rather than spending time adjusting stuff?
So you describing fully automated. What's your opinion on fully automated luxury communism?
I think it's fantastic.
Just to kind of to detail what that means, from my terrible translation of it, fully automated luxury communism comes from the idea that once, basically if you hand over all of your menial work to automation, then you'll be free to write the libretto or play that you want to do or do you want to do.
What's up in here? What do you think? Would you do? Would you?
You know me, Martin, I'm a skeptic.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any questions from the audience at this point? Anybody? No? Okay. Does anybody have a sense of what we can see in 2 to 3 years? Or if 2 to 3 years is too close, 10 years time. What are the trends? What are you imagining for the future?
I'm kind of hoping there's more. It's hard. I think, again, it's hilarious. As a futures person, I tend to find closer horizons more useful than further ones, initially anyway. Because I think that there's some really interesting shifts and change. We were talking about mundanity earlier. I quite like the concept of mundane because it's often actually that the future isn't going to change too much from what we know it now in 2 or 3 years. Yeah. But there's a lot of interesting things that are happening. So, for instance, one of my favorite pieces of new media, or media that isn't particularly glamorous, is Washington Post's fact checker app that you can basically plug into an extension on your browser. And what it does, it will just fact check things from certain organizations with facts. And I guess it goes back to your sort of truth machine, but those smaller things, but they come from an incredible amount of investment in journalists and legal possibilities, because that's where a lot of my concern lies, is in 2 to 3 years, are we going to solve the fact that there are still journalists having problems with press freedom? I mean, Gary Kasparov spoke yesterday about the map of where you don't have press freedom, and it's absolutely astonishing, obviously, that and not entirely unexpected knowing this day and age. But I think I hope there'll be more work done towards supporting, like, it's really boring. It's not like AR or VR or experiences goes, but it's one of those things that they do ultimately influence the narratives that we do end up having in the end. Because if we kind of promote the ability for people to be protected, to tell the stories they want to do, and for us to kind of enable people to do that, then we can start maybe imagining some idea of a better future. I don't know, that's a boring, overblown answer, but...
Do you think we're going to see really large changes in our lifetime, or is this something much later on as far as like how we perceive and engage with our reality?
Super large changes.
Yeah.
The next 50 years will be, basically comparable to the last 100,000. This is what I reckon. This is our lifetimes.
And what's the most exciting or fearful thing in that? Climate change?
Climate change.
Yeah.
That's unfortunately the reality that we have to live in. But like, doesn't mean it's like ultimate apocalypse, obviously, because there are people doing good work in it. And I kind of hope that within 50 years, science will accelerate to a point where it won't be as terrifying as it is.
And how about in the way we consume media? Where is it going to be on our body? Are we going to be viewing it on screens? Have you seen this short film by Kyachi Matsuda?
Hyperreality.
Hyperreality. How many of you have seen this short film? Pretty intense. Somebody just going to the supermarket down the street, and there's just media like entering an arcade all around this person.
Is it the lady from Venezuela riding the bus first? And
Yeah. But that's a great example of like using what the possibilities of media could be to interrogate what they might do to people. That makes sense at all. But I don't know. I love that film. I think it's great.
But I mean, so media as in like, having a response from something, or, because I mean, what I think is interesting now is kind of like actually what I see happening more in my everyday, and the shift for the past, like, 5 years, is really, the development of like Nest, which is, this company that has just recently been bought by Google, which is basically integrating, like services within your home to actually control your lighting system, and then kind of gathering all of this personal data out of yourself, without you actually really kind of even knowing. So like one thing I realized really recently, and I didn't even realize it myself. So this Bitmoji, do you know Bitmoji? This a keyboard thing. Do you know Bitmoji? It changed my life, that thing. I love it. So you make a little avatar, and then you can send all of these kind of like funny faces to your friends. But turns out that when you put this keyboard onto your, and I asked my sister to make her own avatar, and then we could kind of respond. And then she stopped sending me this little thing, and I was like, why did you stop? And she was like, well, when you click on this thing and you put it on your keyboard, basically you also sign up for all of the information that you typed on your keyboard to be sent to Bitmoji. And I thought, this is just insane. So like, through the use of like this really cheesy avatar, you're actually giving away every single thing you ever typed on your phone to that specific company. And I think this is what I found really problematic to me in the next coming years, is also how can we make sure that to some extent legal, I'm very much involved with the United Nations, like quite old institutions in my work, right? So you find actually the UN, for example, is really a slow, motion kind of, institution, which is essential, but they don't go that fast in terms of like putting up a resolution that will apply, worldwide. And so it takes them a lot of time to all agree. And then meantime, of course, you have the kind of the startups finding the kind of the gaps in between and trying to figure out ways where they can actually invade more and more every day. And actually the UK during June last year passed one of the worst ever surveillance law, where basically now every time you enter the UK, any of us just get every single bit of our information is now owned by the UK government. And none of us actually have even protested. None of us even went in the street to kind of like, and so it's now becoming commonly accepted that it is okay. And I accept it myself, it's like, same goes for Front National and Marine Le Pen. Like people just, their perception of what shouldn't be and what is not ethically correct.
But is anybody not bothered by this? Is anybody like, well, this is just the way it's going? Is anybody not bothered? Yeah.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that there's a great paper it's like a lovely essay by Sun Ha Hong, who was at MIT Media Lab. and he talked a lot of the idea of presence and how you know that your data. So you're being told constantly that your data is leaving you and that your data is being taken or stolen by the people, which the sheer fact is it is taken by lots of people. But the problem is it's very hard for you as a person to know that that is happening. So what he kind of talks about is that how do you create the ability for people to know exactly where you're, like the concept of data doppelganger, like where you see your body being and where you see it having influence on you and where it kind of causes violence on you. For instance, when you go for a credit check and you're like, why did I get turned off for that? But what he talks about is in the idea of like experience from a more, how do you do it from an immersive perspective? How do you create like potential environments or things that could help people understand what it means for you to see your body somewhere that it shouldn't be, or what happens. But not even, I mean, like alternative realities is one of them, but like it's a reality for so many people. Like, just saw a great talk by, I've completely forgotten his name, Gemini Matt on Twitter. Great talk about like the history of sort of black surveillance and how it's affecting technology. And you have these real experiences where people can't enter or go into certain places because of unknown knowledge that's to them. So what I'm really interested in as a researcher and as a curator is how do you put people like us into that experience and know what that might feel like? Is it a case of, I don't know, I'm not going to fit AR, VR, but like, there is interesting ways that you can play with the materiality of that stuff and kind of go, okay, so it's an object, it's a thing. What are the limits of this? What can it show me? Where can I really push the boundaries to understand where, I don't know, my body might be somewhere else.
We do have a couple questions from the audience. Very, very quickly want to ask you, do you have any major corporations or big brands that are witnessing these, putting people into these experiences to learn from them? Not yet.
I mean,
Yeah,
Facebook
yeah.
is putting us in
Yeah.
alternative reality,
True.
so there we go.
Okay, thank you. So a couple questions. We have a gentleman in the back here. Microphone, yeah. Oh, we have 3 questions. So this gent back here. Sorry, I'll look at you.
Thank you. I'm Matthew. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the invisible media part of the session, in particular kind of in the ephemeral media or messages that are being created. When we're talking about the media world of tomorrow, how do the invisible media of today, are y'all working on any projects to kind of archive or classify or be able to use these messages that are kind of fleeting, invisible today, to be able to build narratives of the future? So I guess my question is, how are we creating narratives of the future and archiving them, preserving them in order to let future us remember more accurately who now us is?
I didn't hear the last part of the question. Can you repeat that?
Closer to the mic. Closer to the
There
mic.
you go.
Yeah.
Invisible media.
Yeah.
It's ephemeral in some ways. How can we think better about designing the systems that we're archiving or digitizing, whatever it may be, and to make these stronger artifacts for the future?
Okay.
Go ahead.
I can start. I love that question. The reason I like it, because I think this is the only method to do it. We need to start this conversation, and the value exchange there, or emotions, which you touched upon. And before we can express emotions and being curious, asking stupid questions, we need trust. This is why the truth and trust machine are so important there. And once we do that, we can express futures that are bananas, really crazy, but very, very good. And then we don't have to be so skeptical, maybe. We will continue this, I feel, about these futures. The only thing between the imagined future and the future you will have is a little bit of work. Sometimes hard science, sometimes very hard work, but that's it. It always has been like that. This is why I'm coming back to the fact that once you say it and people love it, they go for it. There's no turning back. So I'm telling you, it better be good what you say. It better be utopian than anything else. And that's the method. You express it, you articulate possible, desirable futures, and then you put people to, you ask, who wants this? And I promise you, people will follow. The rest is science and hard work.
So I guess it's a really interesting question, actually. It's like the kind of idea of you having essentially sort of a way for you to remember the crimes of things that, not crimes, a lot of them are crimes that have happened previously, and how you constantly get reminded, or, and as part of the work that I do with a curatorial project called Haunted Machines, is looking at the concept of haunting as a way for you to, usually conventionally you find it as a way to find out where your body is and where there's violence is being enacted upon you. There's a way that you can perhaps maybe use haunting as a way to remind you or to put friction into those places so that you don't run away and get too quick and too lazy is the wrong word, but you lose sight of all of that complexity and friction that made it difficult in the first place. And maybe there's some way, I don't know, some way of you finding some way of accessing that in a way that is maybe random or interesting or with friction. I don't know if that's an answer. But.
Nelly, are you creating any experiences or events that use invisible media or speak to this question at all? If it's no, apologize, but.
I mean, I'm not specifically working on invisible media, but I think it's important to know. I mean, I think as well, it's coming back to you as a user making the choice as well to, kind of collaborate with invisible media and kind of giving away your data as well, and making that choice as well, because to some extent, every single startups or every single companies actually have their, you have your regulation before you sign up to get any kind of apps or any form of media that you kind of sign up for. So it's also your responsibility as well as a citizen to kind of decide whether or not you want to kind of donate that form of data to them. So, for example, it's not secret knowledge, but I work with WeTransfer, which is, a digital company that bring together 90 million, active user a month, which is quite a lot. I mean, I'm sure you have probably, I don't know, at SAP how many users you have. It's like why I started to work with this company is also because, ethically, we are very, one of our key schemes throughout the company at WeTransfer is to, make sure that the user can trust us. So, you share your data. I mean, the basics of WeTransfer is you can share your files, right? Like you just upload your file and then it goes to your colleagues. But why we could have keep all the emails of all of the users, we've decided against any kind of financial scheme to not keep any of the emails. So WeTransfer doesn't keep any of the email of the people you send to, and that's really at the core of the company. And I think this is also the choices that you make of using one toolkit more than another. So yes, WeTransfer is a pretty device where you can share, your files, and it's got all of that. But also behind that, there is also really good ethic within the company. And I think there is still, I'm just trying to be positive here, because I was just talking about it's also, there is some companies there that are against the odds of trying to make business and trying to make more money, are also really considerate about their user and finding ways to actually make sure that they get their files,
The public is getting more savvy, so they know their clientele is not going to buy in unless there's some evidence of trust. We have another question here.
Yes, hello, Felix.
Can you speak directly? Sorry, it's one of those stupid
Just loud and
things,
clear.
Yeah.
Okay, so the companies are getting more and more invasive at the moment with the privacy. Do you think there could be a shift toward a more secure? That the people can, that the data can be more secure again in the future, or do you think this can never go back? There is always going to be more and more private information shared by companies to each other, or in general, that we can never.
Yeah.
It's a very big question.
Sorry.
No, it's
no, but I think
Look into your magic ball.
There is a simple answer to that, I think. It's to say that actually as a consumer and as someone who is also like a citizen, you have a lot of power.
Yeah.
I mean, the bottom line is if everybody and all of us are doing nothing for 1 week, we all decide to not use the iPhone, we all decide to not use media, we just black out, and everybody in this specific room or even in the entire Berlin stop doing it, then you definitely make a stance on how...
What's the reality of that? I mean, everybody was... like the conflict of Facebook's privacy laws, and yet how many of us are on Facebook?
Fight it. If you are not happy with the way they do things, I think there is always potential for us to actually step back and get them to step back. If everybody stopped to use Facebook, look at the case of Uber, right? When the CEO of Uber started to work for Trump, You know, people just stopped using Uber and they say no, and then it was that bad that actually the company decided to flip out and come out of the Trump administration so that they could get their consumer back. So it says a lot about actually we have been told and we have been kind of like debilitated in believing that we have no power over these companies. But actually, we really do. Like, actually, if you stop using them, they can't work.
So I agree with Nelly wholeheartedly. I guess the issue is always is how people's attitudes to like leaving those services, because one of the problems you have with something like Facebook, for instance, because it's become so socially integrated as a way of people talking to each other, that actually unless everyone and all of your friends go at the same time, it's very hard for you to like detach yourself from that. And this is me, again, kind of going, I wish everyone would just kind of like get off Facebook and it would be good. But people, like, they've become so interlaced with culture in so many ways where it's like, it's difficult for you to say to your, I don't know, my brother, for instance, like, get off Facebook, it's collecting your data, it's bad for you. And he's like, well, all my friends are there, how am I going to find out what they're doing this thing? And you could say to him, you can just text each other, or you can talk, but because his social structure has become based on that thing, it's really difficult. And that's often what I think is the real, like, crux point in there is like, I would love it if like people did understand the power of like you just putting your money or not putting your money where your mouth is and kind of choosing to choose alternative services. And there've been a really interesting crop of like newer platforms like Mastodon that try to kind of look at that distributed way of doing things. But the problem is like, it's like, this is kind of why, again, going back to media and stories and narratives, the idea of sort of like giving people like small snapshots or understandings of what those alternatives might look like, or actually, I don't know, finding ways of getting people to kind of almost take that step and try something different, try something, I don't know, but without obviously being really careful about who controls those narratives as well, just to be a skeptic. But.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and narratives are the thing. I've seen a pyramid long time ago. You know, you build your features, that's data for us, and then you design them into a product and you put new features in the product. Then you serve it, that's services, right? And then you have a relationship with your audience. That could be media, could be software, could be whatever you're producing. And as a designer, I always say to anybody, to any student, or whatever, start with designing the relationship you want to have through telling narratives. Relationships, you know, the future, the next big thing, it's not the thing, it's a relation between things that's always changing. And you can design that. So that's important. Relationships are the invisible media. Because they are invisible, we have them, and then convey everything. So if Facebook tells you stuff, or another service tells you stuff, hey, if you do this over and over again, you might end up in a bad place. If Facebook started that discussion, how can we change that? Can you help us? You feel that you trust them. If they use technologies like, I don't know, blockchain, that makes you in the control of everything that you say, then you trust them more, you have a different relationship. That's the future media, because the media itself, the content, is the curation of that, it's pointless. That can be done by algorithms today already. Look at your Spotify playlists. So I'm looking to designing relationships between things, people and things, and people and people. As someone said, let's augment people with people. That would be fantastic. And then you will know how to serve it. Then you will know what technology to use, and then you will know what features to put. But start designing the invisible media of tomorrow, which is the relationships we will have. Because now we have time. We don't have to do the bullshit jobs, as I talked about before. You had a name for it as well. So.
Some of us don't have to do the bullshit jobs, but there are a lot of people that rely on those jobs.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm a little concerned about that.
I didn't say anything about that.
There's a certain percentage of population that needs just like manual labor, and not everybody's going to be engineers.
No, nobody needs manual labor.
Well, no, nobody needs manual labor, but
Our economy needs manual labor, and that's a huge difference.
Yes. So how are we going to provide a force of labor? Like, how are people going to sustain themselves in this utopian society? Where I don't even like, I mean, maybe we won't need jobs, but how, in the society that we have now with our economy, what are people going to be doing?
Oh, but can I start?
Please.
Look, we will have so much fun. I mean, through Homo sapiens history, the more time we got, the more fun we had, right? And we got better lives. That's just history. And I think, why would it change right now? We will have more time on our hands to do much more high-level work, much more high-level thinking and conversations, and building much more high-level relations, showing much deeper emotions to each other. So I think we will have more to do than ever if you thought that we're out of jobs. And it will be more fun than ever. It will be absolutely amazing. And the relationships we will build will be deep. That will be the media between humans.
Sorry, I'm just confused. How do we define bullshit job?
Yeah.
I tell you a job.
Social caring responsibilities.
So let's take away the bullshit thing, because that's I'm swearing, and the second I'm putting value in it. I'm putting value in it. For example, we know that people today count logotypes on a hockey match that appear on a TV with a clicker. I guess they're students, you need the money, it's a good job to get quick money and you can do something else. And that's for the ads to be counted, so you get the money for the contract. That job can be done by a computer. So we're doing that today with machine vision, or Volvo, or and so on. So, and the computers are superhuman, which means they're better than humans. Okay, cool. By taking away that, we just not only changed how people work, we changed what work is. That is not work anymore. We just decided that's not work, that belongs to machines. It's just automation. So the student can read a book, or write a poem, or whatever, or maybe create a new startup.
But what about care work? Like care
About
work,
what?
care work. Like care work is one of those things that everyone thinks is a bullshit job. Like the person who mops up after your grandparents and announces them as
Why
care
would
home,
that be opposite to that? I don't see. That's not even on the same spectrum.
The dream of the automated future often is like the idea of us equating people and their jobs to being as similar as machines, which I completely disagree. That's a wildly general statement. But there's a lot of jobs that do rely on the nuance and emotions of people that we can't just easily automate. And they're often really badly paid, overworked people who often get forgotten about in line of those sort of futures. And I'm, again, a lot of my worry is about us going towards this everything will be fun and will be amazing and brilliant, but it will be for us because we're a bunch of white people on the stage being asked about media. But the people who aren't at this conference, the people who kind of look after us, and I guess going back again to narratives, this is the things that I'm really intrigued about. It's like Nick Foster from Near Future Laboratory talks about not designing for the hero, but for the girl at the bus stop who's got 3 kids to support. And actually that's the future that I want to think more about, because we've already solved the Bruce Willis action, brilliant, everything's fine future, but we need to tell more stories in better ways about the people who are going to suffer.
Sure, but that wasn't, I didn't say anything against or that would oppose that, did I?
But there, I would imagine in our transition to utopia, there's a certain class, several classes of a in society that, I don't know, it's terrifying. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just...
If you make it up, there will be.
I appreciate that.
Because this is how humans work. If I say there are 5 classes, 5, not 3 nor 6, you already imagine these 5, right?
I think a lot of power structures are doing that.
If I said there's no classes, you go, how would that work?
I would.
Good.
I love your thinking, but unfortunately, a lot of people don't think that way. Unfortunately, on this amazing note, I think we're really getting started. We have to close. So are there any final questions from the audience? Oh, good. We have 2. We have 2. So 2 questions from the audience. This one over here. Yeah. There's someone back here.
I guess this is less of a question, more of a statement. Hey, Natalie.
Hello.
I guess this is directed more towards Martin. My job didn't exist 2 years ago, but I'm an online harassment researcher. That's definitely not a part of a utopia. It's definitely part of a dystopia. Part of my job, I was actually one of the keynotes earlier, part of my job is using machine learning to analyze language. You can't automate that. So I guess I wonder if you had to think of, or I guess rather confront the dystopia I think we live in, the fact that we live in a society that can implement bias inside of machine learning. If you look at any kind of predictive policing that's being implemented inside the United States, or fake news, at least that's what my president calls our actual legitimate news sources. How do you, how do you, I guess, or the panel, think about or meditate on that as like this is part of our future. We're living dystopias, and these dystopias are things we carry into all the different networks we're already on that are already using systems we can't intervene in. And again, I think my job is a good example of like the realities of this. My job exists for a reason. I'm paid a fair amount of money to do what I do.
I mean, I will just answer to that by saying that actually, I do not want to depict a future in which everything is made of fake news and I just think that we are all entailed to always think for the worst, while actually I do believe that what happened following, of course, Trump election is that, there is massive amount of social action that kind of started to develop. There is also a lot of people that started to be politicized where they never been politicized before. So I'm not saying, of course, that, great, Trump is elected, not at all, and not at all what I'm saying. But what I'm trying to say there is like, there is maybe some politics of hopes there that, we can kind of like witness to some extent, and I believe that maybe you would think that I'm very naive to think that, but I actually think that there is, I still really believe in the power of, citizens kind of like taking action, going back into the street. I mean, obviously, I'm French, like, that's all over me.
I'm
1789, like this is it. Let's cut off all the kings and the queens. But I think there is a potential into the power that, we can all inherit there. So if you think that fake news shouldn't be there, let's just find who is making fake news. Let's just go and turn down the entire electricity of the building. Let's just go back into social action in the way that we can actually make that change happen. And I think it's like, my response to that is we created a university which is called the University of the Underground, right? Where we are based down below to try and figure out ways where we can get students to investigate some of these issues and try to figure out ways where they can infiltrate this institution that we want to change from within. I mean, there is nothing, we are all creative people here. There is nothing that can stop us from just being at really high places. And once we are there, to actually seed this change and make it happen.
What
is the fatality in that?
People are brilliant and resilient, messy, ridiculous
Yeah, we are
objects.
parasites. We always have been on this planet.
And I guess that there's a great talk by Sarah Watson that I saw yesterday where she talked about why we need to have better stories about AI. The main key that she has, we either have ultimate dystopias where Terminator or utopias that don't really work because actually they're just kind of fluff. I think, sorry, I know you like utopias. Utopias aren't often helpful because they're often determined by one person or by one particular line of thought. And she kind of argued for this way of building narratives that have that complexity to them, where it's not overly positive or dystopian, but it understands the acknowledgement of that ecosystem. And the fact that it's like Madeline Ashby, fantastic futurist who I work with, says your utopias might be someone else's dystopias. But the way you can only see that is by having this multi-narrative, which is why, again, not without going back to the kind of the dreams of transmedia, the idea that you could kind of see lots of different things at once and you could fold the web in, that kind of thing, it's not that quite, but how do you show all of those different realities and things that exist at the same time in one place so that you can understand what they look like together? I don't know, but
that's a brilliant question. The last question you had there. We know today that nobody can predict the future. We can just tell a future and people will run for it. The reason we can tell a future is because we can imagine and choose. There's a spectrum of futures. That's absolutely sure. There's thousands and thousands of possible futures. And as you say, some futures are scary for me, but fantastic for others. Now we need to place them in one place and start a discussion, a deep conversation around them. How would we relate to each other if this happened? And to do that, we need to tell what that if is very, very vividly. And this is why I think, for example, new technologies like the storytelling techniques and technologies like VR and AR are fantastic for that. Because you can say, what if this? Put this helmet on or try this suit or whatever, take this pill, experience that. And you come back and say, yeah, I like that, but what if this? And then you tweak it and move on. And then we can have discussion about the spectrum of choices and see what's positive and desirable for us, instead of being handed the freaking future in your face by a Trump, by a Elon Musk, or whoever is out there and doing it.
I think human beings are very reactive, actually, and the trend is actually quite positive. When we look at it rationally, we're moving in a really great direction. So we may have a bad spell, we may have a positive spell, but it's always reactionary and it's always moving forward.
Exactly.
So it's. Well, I know that one gentleman had a question. Yeah, very quickly, because we're actually out of time. Go for it. Oh, yell it out loud.
So AR, VR, or invisible media, if you had to choose, which would you bet on becoming the most dominant of those three?
Oh, God.
Sorry.
I was joking before this panel. I was like the future of media is often the future, the kind of the narrative and future of trash. In terms of like, when I say trash, I mean like the stuff that's going to build up that we're going to end up having in our cupboards and that kind of thing. But I think I don't see it as being any of those particular things as being in its current form as it is, but there are going to be iterations of many and different things because of the nature of market. It doesn't mean it's going to be a good one or any of them are going to be good. But I think what I'm more intrigued to see is the lessons that are learned from those particular things. It's like, why do we abandon VR? Why do we abandon AR? Why do we get rid of all this stuff? And actually, is it because everyone got sick because they put VR headsets on, or because they just found it really invasive and didn't like it very much? Like, that's what I'm more intrigued in. I don't know. People might hate it.
Okay.
I'm just curious what you had to say about that.
I would say invisible media. If invisible media mean, like that, to some extent, it will be taken over by an invisible generation that is going to grow from down below all the way to the top. I mean, that to me would be the ultimate, is that actually we start to, the storm of the rebellion is kind of growing from like down below. The cockroaches and the rats of the city are kind of like expanding. And then from there down below, we go and we integrate all of these high power places, and then we make it happen the other way around.
Yeah.
And we change and we flip it. We integrate that system to actually pervert it from within. That, to me, would be the ultimate. If invisible media was actually owned by this invisible generation that go and infiltrate.
Okay, guys. Closing statement. What will we be talking about next year at this time? 3 words or less. John.
Oh.
3 words or less. Okay, 1 sentence, fine. 1 sentence.
How to design the future. I want to talk about it. We need to continue this. How to design the future.
Great.
Has anything changed?
Has anything changed? Oh, okay.
That's
It's owning it. She's owning it 100%.
It could be positive or negative.
It's great. It's good. And?
What will we be? So the question is, what will be the question next year?
Sure. Yeah.
Is that the question?
Or what will we be talking about? What's the question? Yep. That's fine. Either one.
I don't know.
What do you want to talk about next year?
I want to talk about how can we become president next?
I wouldn't be surprised by you, but Nelly, if I saw you like in 4 years' time. I wouldn't be surprised if I saw you run for president in like 4 years' time. If anyone's going to do it.
I will give it a try,
Yeah, if anyone's going to do
But
it, Nelly's
not only me. I hope that everybody. I think that would be fantastic, actually, if we were all to run for the presidential all at once, all together.
Let's just
because that will actually really break down this
Can you
entire
imagine
system.
the party political broadcasting time? It'd be like 4 years to get everyone. That'd be amazing. You could
Would be. I mean, there is a huge potential.
Separate panel off stage. We'll continue our discussion together. We're all welcome. Everyone, let's thank the panelists of speakers this evening. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you. Just want to let you guys know, tomorrow on this stage at 11:15, Data Cockpit. Make data great again. That's going to be happening tomorrow at 11:15. I didn't write that. Thank you so much. Have a good night.